Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with some more of the Great War, and we are on to week 180 Machinations in the British High Command. What a title. I just love hearing about the British High Command. Anyways, before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love it if you joined the Discord and followed me over at Twitch, and also followed my gaming channel here on YouTube, where I upload just funny shorts and my stream VODs. So yeah, go check that out. I'm really gonna keep trying to push that one out there. Because I don't know, maybe it'll do better than this dying channel. This channel's actually been on a slow death for like over a year. But anyways, with some glimpses of hope that have been quickly squashed by the YouTube algorithm. But anyways, we are now into the final 11 months of World War I. We're nearing the end. I don't know how many more months of actual videos we have to watch. Like, I know it goes to like 220. I'm not doing the math to know how many more weeks of recording I have to do of this. I'm a bit I'm excited. I'm excited. So, yeah, let's just go ahead and dive right in.
1917 has come to an end. It was a year of almost unimaginable events to people just a couple of years ago. Not one, but two Russian revolutions. The war to end all wars growing ever larger as the United States joined the fray.
Proletariat.
Battles on unheard of scales like Passchendaele and Arras, a mutiny in the French army, stormtroop tactics at Caporetto, hundreds of tanks taking the field in France, ever more and ever better planes taking to the skies. It went on and on. Hundreds of thousands of the dead month after month, and now it's 1918.
Woo! Time for the Americans to start dying in droves, right? Hell yeah, brother. Bring our trench guns, shotgun, piss off the Germans.
I'm Indy Nidell. Welcome to the Great War. Last week was Christmas, and the British celebrated it in newly taken Jerusalem. The Austrians were unable to take Venice before heavy winter snows arrived. Russia and the Central Powers began peace negotiations, Russia having left the war several weeks ago. But Russia itself was far from at peace, as fighting broke out with the Ukrainians and Russian territories declared independence. A bloody civil war loomed ahead. Okay, that was a little dramatic, and not entirely true, for that civil war had already begun in the south. On New Year's Eve, the Soviet Red Army occupied Kharkov. Many former officers in the Russian army have now joined General Alexei Kaledin, the leader of the Don Cossacks, to fight the Red Army.
Let's see, he dies in 1918, so I think we know what happens.
Anti-Bolshevik forces were also being formed by Lav Kornilov in the Kuban region and Mikhail Alexeyev in the Novo...
Oh man, so many people dying in 1918. I wonder what happens to them. I wonder what happens to their side.
The Bolsheviks were still consolidating Russia and sorting out who, when, and where they would have to fight to retain control. On the 29th, they seized the banks, while on January 4th, they recognized Finnish independence. As for the peace negotiations between the Bolsheviks and the Central Powers, this week, the Germans announced that their occupation of Poland, Courland, Lithuania, and Estonia were indispensable parts of any peace. On January 2nd, the Soviet Central Committee met and denounced those terms. And in the West, Russia's withdrawal from the war certainly posed new dangers for the Allies. But one thing it did not really affect was the USA's cautious policy. On New Year's Day, America's General John J. Pershing opposed, successfully, an urgent request from British Prime Minister David Lloyd George for any and all surplus troops to be sent over immediately to Europe to be incorporated with the French and British armies. The request was because Lloyd George feared the possibility that the Germans were soon to launch a knockout punch before a trained American army could get to the lines. As we saw last week, this was in fact the Germans' plan. As for their own plans, the Allied Supreme War Council had decided there would be no major offensives of theirs in 1918. And Winston Churchill wrote this week, "Thank God our offensives are at an end. Let them traipse across the crater fields. Let them rejoice in the occasional capture of placeless names and sterile ridges. But how was the situation at home for, say,
Can we talk that line, placeless names? So good, right? Because we got names of villages here, but there ain't no villages there no more. They're gone. They're rubble. There's nothing there. That's a good line. Placeless name. I wouldn't have thought of that. I'm gonna use that sometime. I'm gonna use that in a book or something sometime. When oh, fantasy has war and tragedy. Could use that somewhere. Oh yeah.
say, France and Britain? Well, things may have been less terrible there than in Germany or Austria-Hungary, since they had access to American supplies and all. But even though there was no desperate deprivation, there was weariness with the war and the endless heartbreak it brought. The government suppressed this harshly, but there was weariness with them too, and everyday life grew darker and darker. In many ways, they were no longer even really democracies. I mean, citizens not in favor of the war did not have a whole lot of liberty to air their views, and basically all information available to the public was propaganda. French losses had passed 3 million by now. And in 1917, they were taking some 40,000 casualties per month. And how could they replace them? Philippe Pétain estimated that he would need 1.02 million new troops on the Western Front in 1918. As it turned out, he would never get 3/4 of that. His army had mostly recovered from the mutinies earlier in the year, had fought off countless German attacks over the summer, and had itself been successful at Malmaison and Verdun. But new Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau and Ferdinand Foch, his advisor, had little regard for Pétain and his cautious approach. There is a good section about Britain in A World Undone. With its larger population, its global empire from which to draw manpower, and only 2 million casualties since the start of the war, Britain should have been in a better position than France. But in fact it was not, at least in the view of its commanders. The problem was not, strictly speaking, a shortage of soldiers. Some 450,000 fit and ready combat troops were being held at home at Lloyd George's insistence, and only labor units that were neither armed nor trained for battle were allowed to cross the Channel. Sir Douglas Haig was so short of replacements that he reduced the number of battalions per brigade from 4 to 3 to avoid having to dissolve whole divisions. Interesting that Lloyd George is requesting American troops at the same time that he's holding his own back. Now, we've mentioned before the deep issues between Haig and Lloyd George. Lloyd George wanted to dismiss Haig, but was stuck with him. But he could try to control him by getting rid of his supporters. The first of these to go was Brigadier General John Charters, Haig's chief of intelligence. Now, he was not trained in military intel and is sometimes blamed for Haig's errors, and he certainly made those of his own. 3 days before the big German counterattack,
Seems like Haig propaganda blaming someone else except for Haig. Just saying.
Cambrai a month
Just
ago,
saying. I am a Haig hater, alright? We hate Haig here.
he told Haig that the Germans were very thin on that front. Anyhow, he was let go on December 14th. Haig's Quartermaster General R.C. Maxwell was gone 2 days later. Now, on New Year's Day, Lord Derby, the Minister for War, told Haig that Lloyd George wanted to get rid of Army Chief of Staff Willie Robertson and replace him with Henry Wilson. Derby did say that he opposed this, but he himself wanted to get rid of Lancelot Kegel, awesome name, as Haig's Chief of Staff. Haig would reluctantly agree to this, and Kegel would be gone January 12th. So you can see that there are some serious divisions within the British High Command, and they had no unity. But the one thing they did have was stuff. Endless stuff. The American cornucopia of stuff was vomiting forth across the Atlantic. But even British arms production itself was growing. By now, 250,000 tons of shells were being shipped across the Channel every month. And that was less than a third of all the stuff arriving at the BEF bases in northern France. The longer Germany waited to deliver this knockout blow, the tougher that job was going to be. There was fighting in the field this week, though, on the Italian front. At the end of last week, the Austrian bridges on the Zensen bend of the Piave River were destroyed. And now, on New Year's Eve, the Austrians were forced to abandon their bridgehead. They did bomb such cities this week as Treviso, Veneto, and Padua. In the Middle East, the British continued their advance from Jerusalem. And here is now an odd side note that I haven't really had anywhere else to throw in, so it comes here. Okay, it's from Martin Gilbert's The First World War. On that front, the Palestine front, General Edmund Allenby, the British commander, got a fighting spider whose jaws could sever a scorpion's tail. He named it Hindenburg. And the first week of 1918 ends. The British in the Middle East and the Italians in Italy advance.
A fighting spider? Wait, hold on. Are there spider fight clubs in the Middle East? Like, you know, chicken cockfights? Like, is that a thing? That's fucking crazy. I'd never go near it because I do not. Spiders, no. I will stay away from those things. Those things, terrifying, nasty little creatures is. Okay?
Advancing, the Bolsheviks consolidating power as their enemies consolidate their forces, and political machinations in the British High Command, and peace talks and proposals between Russia and the Central Powers. You know, though at least people were meeting to talk about a sort of peace, in reality, 1917 came to an end absolutely without the prospect of peace in Europe. The ceasefire on the Eastern Front turned out to be the prelude to an immediate and bloody civil war. And the Bolsheviks weren't happy with the emerging peace terms at Brest-Litovsk. Behind the lines, those nations whose food imports were hurt by blockade had it worse and worse. In Constantinople alone, some 10,000 people had starved to death in 1917. In Germany, 250,000 people had died from hunger-related causes that year, directly attributable to the naval blockade. There were food strikes and riots in the Habsburg Empire in Vienna and Budapest that reached the point where 7 army divisions were recalled from the front to keep the peace and were now there permanently to prevent street violence. The Europe that had settled in for winter looked like a dying civilization. Before the war, Russia had seemed to many like it had the brightest future of the great empires. Now it lay in ruins, and the Tsar and his family were prisoners. A potential democratic government was gone, and Lenin and the Bolsheviks were consolidating the wreckage. The people had no security, no stability, and life was basically worth nothing. That's what faced the people of Russia as the new year rolled in. Happy New Year.
Yay.
If you'd like to learn more,
Those Machinations in the British High Command, the Great War Week 180. Not too exciting of a week. It is the start of the year. We are in the middle of winter. There really isn't probably going to be much going on here. Probably next week there probably won't be much either. Probably going to be a little bit until it starts to get real exciting once again. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.